U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire is our guest this morning. It's time to go on the record. She is the dean of the Granite State Congressional Delegation, a popular Democrat in a state with conservative roots. In a divided Washington, can she forge consensus in a time of COVID-19? Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR for this Sunday. I'm Ed Harding. Normally Janet Wu was with us this morning, but she's off this week. Our guest this morning is the senator from the state of New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. She's a senior senator, a political trailblazer. She's the first woman elected governor and senator in the Granite State. She is now seeking a third term on Capitol Hill. The senator joins us from her home in Madbury, New Hampshire. Senator, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for your time.
Nice to be with you.
It's okay, Senator. Let's start with the news this week concerning the dramatic spikes in coronavirus cases nationally. It is sobering, to say the least, yet there is still a major split on how to deal with the crisis. Science versus politics. Dr. Anthony Fauci even found himself the target of White House attacks on his credibility. Can the Senate exert any kind of pressure to stop the sniping and put the focus back on the pandemic itself?
Well, clearly we need to be making decisions based on scientific evidence, what that tells us, and not based on somebody's ideology. And unfortunately, most of our Republican colleagues in the Senate have been unwilling to hold this White House accountable throughout this pandemic. So there are things we could do, and I would hope that people would begin, as we see an increased rise in cases, as we see the number of states affected expanding throughout the map. I'm hopeful that maybe we will see a change in our Republican colleagues and they will begin to speak up, because when lives are at stake, it is especially important to let the facts, to let the scientific data, to let the medical advice drive the decision making.
I'd like to ask you about masks, because a simple statement from the head of the CDC by saying if everybody wore a mask, 4 to 6 weeks from now we could have, and certainly not reined in, but a much better handle on this. So what about masks? Just generally, should they be mandated? Should this be a personal decision? What about it? What's your opinion?
I think people should be required to wear a mask. It is a way to keep not just each of us safe in ourselves, but to protect our neighbors and friends and colleagues. I have a granddaughter who has type 1 diabetes, so she has one of those underlying conditions that puts her at greater risk. I would hate to think that she might be infected with the coronavirus because one of her neighbors or someone she came in contact with was unwilling to wear a mask. It doesn't make sense. And it's unfortunate that the issue has gotten so politicized. Here in New Hampshire, people have done a good job of wearing masks, of social distancing. In stores, most of the stores, when you go up, you'll see a sign that reminds people to stay 6 feet apart, that reminds them that they need to wear a mask in order to come in. And we're seeing that more and more across the country as people begin to understand what's at stake here and why it's so important to wear a mask. You know, we saw the Surgeon General, I think a week or so ago, say people should understand why it's so important to wear a mask, the science behind that, the fact that that helps to save lives. And, it's just, it's outrageous that it has gotten so politicized, that so many people whose lives might have been saved have been lost because of this ideological debate.
Because it's become so politicized, is that why a wear masks mandate, universally across the country is unlikely to happen?
I think so. Sadly, we just saw in Georgia that even though the mayor of Atlanta says everyone should wear a mask in Atlanta because it's going to save lives, we saw the governor not just say he disagreed with that, he wasn't going to put in a mandate for the state of Georgia, but took her to court to prevent her from making that decision for the citizens of Atlanta. And I don't know how the court is going to rule there, but again, it should be the science that drives those kinds of decisions.
What about
it's a small thing to wear a mask if it saves lives.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but it's such an effective thing. What about a stimulus package? Again, what about more money? What about another stimulus package? People are still affected by this. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's disappointing to me that we had another package of help come out of the House, something called the HEROES Act. That was done back in May, and that Mitch McConnell has refused to take up that package of assistance, has refused to acknowledge. Just until recently, we saw in the last few days, he said, well, maybe people do need more help. But it's very clear. I've been out around New Hampshire in the last 2 weeks, and it's clear that people do need more help. We've got a number of folks who are going to lose their unemployment benefits come the end of July. We've got small businesses that still need help as they're trying to get through this period and get fully open and get their customers back. We see nursing homes that need help with personal protective equipment because they're still facing the pandemic. We see more testing and contact tracing that needs to be done in states, and more help for hospitals. We've got a number of hospitals in New Hampshire who shut down their elective procedures so they could address the pandemic, and they're in real financial trouble. So there is a lot of help that's needed. And for schools, if we're going to get schools back open, I visited a school in Rochester, New Hampshire this week, and I heard from the superintendent, the principal, the teachers there, the challenges that they're going to be facing. They want to bring the kids back. They know that it's important to get the kids back in school, but they need help, and they need help from Washington to do that, because the cleaning supplies, the additional personal protective equipment that it's going to take, the juggling of how to fit the number of students that they have into the classrooms that they have. All of that requires assistance. So we have a lot of work to do in Washington. So we've got to help child care centers get back open.
You opened the door with schools, so let's keep going there. Getting kids back in school safely this fall is a huge issue, and there are just so many questions that go with it. You know, like how to do it, when to do it, should masks be mandatory, what about child care? Let's start with the fact that in New Hampshire, Governor Sununu is not requiring people to wear masks. If you know, obviously if you'd like to, you can, but he's not requiring it. Is that the right call?
Well, I think for school districts, as they're thinking about bringing kids back, they're going to make the tough decision to ask people to wear masks. That's what I heard in Rochester when I was there. And again, that's why they need help. There are costs involved in that personal protective equipment, costs that the school district didn't budget for. And so we've got to help with that. You know, I'm a former teacher. I understand how important it is for kids to get back into the classroom, that they need that guidance, the learning that the teacher helps provide for them. But in order to do that, we've got to see how we can do it safely. And that means assistance. It means making changes. We're not going to be able to do things in the way that people are used to. And so we've got to let people know that. We've got to communicate. We've got to help people understand what the challenge is and make sure that in Washington we provide the help that school districts are going to need.
If not for COVID-19 and the crisis that we're in the middle of now, the Democratic National Convention would have been held in Milwaukee last week. Joe Biden is riding high in the polls right now. Should he name his running mate right now? What do you think?
Well, I'm sure he's got a process that he's engaged in. He's talking to a lot of people. I personally am excited that he's talking about nominating or asking a woman to serve on the ticket with him. For those of us who have been anxious to see a woman in the White House, I think that would be very exciting. But I don't think anybody's going to push him to rush that decision. He's going to be comfortable with the person he names, and I think it's important for him to take the time that's required to get it done and get it done right.
So let me ask you directly. We just showed some video of Kamala Harris of California. She's seen as a unifying choice as the nation struggles to end systemic racism. Should he not only nominate a woman, but a woman of color?
Well, again, I think he's got to make that decision. There are some wonderful women of color who are being vetted for the position. Kamala Harris is one of those. I get to serve with her, and she is very smart. She has a great appeal to young people, which is very exciting. She can identify with minority communities. But you know, I also serve with Tammy Duckworth, who's not a woman of color, but she's also an Asian Asian Pacific American, and she is very talented and has a record that's unmatched when you talk about service to the country, a woman who's lost both her legs in the military while she was serving in Iraq. So we have a lot of very smart, very accomplished women, and I'm excited that, again, that the Vice President is talking about naming a woman to serve with him.
I've heard
should
the
he
name,
get elected.
I've heard the name Maggie Hassan had been in the early part of the conversation too. So your colleague in the Granite State is also in the conversation.
Absolutely, and obviously I think my colleague Maggie Hassan is wonderful. She's smart, she's caring, she listens well to people. She's been a governor and now a senator, so she would also be a great choice, except we don't want to lose the Senate seat in New Hampshire.